So, welcome back to another episode of Black Men, a conversation. These conversations that we're having, we're giving you an opportunity to be a fly on the wall in an effort to add to the conversation that you may be having in private. If you find these conversations enlightening, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share with others. Today is part two of our manhood conversation. In part one, we talked about our definitions of Black manhood and where we taught wrong. And tonight's topics are what are we missing as it relates to Black manhood, and where do we go from here?
All that's gonna fade away, gonna fade away. Your life's gonna fade away, all you want will fade away. What drives an insecure
So
dude?
now,
Foreign
as we
cars are driving a
talk
mini
about
coupe, mini
tonight's
coupe. Many
topic
haters that love to
around
see
Black manhood, Deanne, let's start with you. What are we missing as it relates to Black manhood, in your opinion?
I think there are several things that we're missing, but I think the highest thing that we're missing is a God angled view of why we were created and what we're supposed to be doing. Um, my faith teaches me that I was made in the image of God. I'm an image bearer. It's the Imago Dei. I think we don't look at ourselves like that, or we don't take it seriously, and we don't look at other Black men like that either. It's part of the problem within the community, how we view ourselves and how we view others. It allows us to have sometimes a low self-esteem and or not a high enough level of pride in the ethnic group in which you were born into. It's not a mistake that you were born into this, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's actually wonderful. It's a blessing. Um, and in some sense, we are missing. That's a thing that we're missing. But there's another thing that we're missing as far as the conversation. We're missing a complete picture. We get spoken to about. Um, we hear a lot about deadbeat dads, absenteeism. We hear about good fathers. We hear about so many different things, but it's usually one view from whoever you're talking to. We get a pixel out of the picture instead of painting it the whole picture. Like one of the things that I want to get into tonight is how many Black men are raising children in the United States of America that are not biologically theirs,
Mm.
and why aren't they getting any credit for that? It's a lot of stuff we're missing, and we'll get into it as we expand this conversation.
Quinn, jump in and you know, in your opinion, what are we missing as it relates to Black manhood?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question. I think the part that I focus on the most, even just in that statement, is the man part. A lot of what we're missing today is pretty much our basic humanity that we give to ourselves, in the perspective of we embody a cause, we embody a person, not we embody a stance, we embody a belief, and in trying to do so, sometimes we don't allow ourselves just to be, and to be imperfect, and to be just who you are. And from my perspective, I think we need to allow ourselves permission more to just be, and to not be the image for which we feel like we the paradigm traditionally which we were told that we needed to be. Because I think the reality comes into place that most of the time we were that picture we were painted was never anything that we could ever live up to. So by restoring our humanity, we give ourselves permission to be imperfect and to recognize we were never designed to be perfect to begin with. And so, from my perspective, I think that if you want to start somewhere and just restoring our own humanity in ourselves and believing that we're okay, and granted, I'm not going to say that there's not room for improvement, because there's 100% is, but knowing that, you know, this journey is mine, and like, it's okay to find joy in it. It's okay to, you know, have a little bit of peace in it, and to find a little bit of happiness. The thing that's most challenging, I think I found at this point in my life, is this constant internal struggle we have between the person we think we're meant to be and who we are. And I think it just boils down to just letting yourself be happy with who you are and not worrying about who you think you should be.
Mm. Ezra, in your opinion, what are we missing as it relates to Black manhood?
I agree with both Dion and Quinn. Number one, with the picture of who we are. Historically, all of us in some way have received a model of manhood from men who actually lived earlier years of this experience and still found some way to have pride, still found some way to find meaning and some type of dignity for themselves. For me, of course, I always try to give a church perspective, because much people try to be anti-church now. It's much of the forming of where we got dignity from. In every community we were in, you was boy, you was 60 years old, being called a boy in front of your grandson. You had to stop or move off the sidewalk. I mean, this has been historically the picture of our African American experience. And I try to make sure as much as possible that we always identify today's picture is as African Americans who we are in America. And so from generation to generation, it's always been a test and call out of your, what Quinn just mentioned about your humanity. If you are human, if you are to be treated as human, if you to be respected as human. And that's always been a piece that a Black man has always had to deal with publicly. Public shame, public embarrassment, public challenge, public, you know, humility, being humiliated. This has always been this piece that I see your strength, but I will never affirm your strength. I see your excellence. I see your strive. I see your brilliance, but I will never give credit to what you bring to the table. I will always make you think less of yourself. So when we mention about manhood, of course, Dion gives the perfect picture of what we need to look at, of course, from what God says. And that has always been a piece to try to help us combat these pictures that we're given. We're given everything from a white perspective of what we should be. And then we're always put into a white structure of what you can obtain. So as much as we grow and learn, we have to always try to find a way to cipher out of this experience. Who am I? Where can I fit? Where am I accepted? And what community do I belong to? So I think, as both have said today, number one is a matter of us saying to ourselves, okay, what is the model? What can I say is my model? Then number two, as in, okay, give myself space to grow. I would say my personal opinion, with me agreeing both of their views, is that we're missing role models. For all of us growing up, 80s babies, you had some form of a strong man in your life. If it was a principal, if it was a coach, if it was a preacher, a deacon, if it was a mason, if it was some person part of a fraternity, if it was someone in the neighborhood who took interest in teaching you or showing you certain things, whether it was somebody that we could look to and see that they have something I'm missing in my environment and somehow look up to that I would like to be. Well, now, thinking about it, we know recently our old classmate, teammate, James Ellis lost his father. And in the midst of COVID, a lot of people weren't able to make it, and I felt obligated to go. He never was my coach, but I remember, and I wanted to be there for my teammate. 98 district champs. So we're gonna go and support, James Ellis. While I get there, I see a lot of the kids in lives that he has impacted and he has invested in weren't present, but I also saw the pain on the faces of those he coached. I seen people who drove out of town to be at the funeral during COVID to say, I got to show my respect. I heard from those that we know personally who fathers were absent and who family members were fiends and who were struggling financially, economically, whatever. And he paid for them to be in AAU, and he paid for them to be in tournaments, whatever. And he pushed them and gave them examples for them to say, okay, I do believe in me. Well, that's all gone now. You know, you don't see no black men teachers, right? You see universities trying to give scholarships out to find a black man to be a teacher. You don't see a lot of black coaches in respective schools like that. You don't see the church even have the prominence in our community no more of the preacher or deacon, because of all of the other folly that goes on, that even if we know what they're supposed to represent, we have some type of side eye if they're actually legit. So that strips all of potential community examples that we have with us knowing within our home that a man is not present. And then a culture of a black woman who will raise a black child that will tell that black boy, you don't need nobody. It's just us. You, my little man. You, the man of this house. And we breed this from a brokenness that no one has solutions for. With absence of God, with absence of role models. And then we have our own communities that are buying into the same concept that you don't need nobody. You got me. Which put us in a whole other place of understanding life, because if mama died, who I got? If big mama died, who I got? It's nobody else. So that's the issue I see in our community, is that we don't have it, and we don't have men who are saying, I'm willing to be that example and be responsible for another. In my home alone, as I close, the first time, as a Baptist preacher would say, I have my nephew here with me, and I seen this when he was a child, and my wife can explain and tell and give credit that when I met and came to his family, I saw the absentee of his father. I saw the struggle of his mother raising him and his sister, and I seen he had other uncles on both sides of the family. But I told her I know I'm going to be more active in his life. Fast forward 15, 17 years later, he's here. But it's something I saw then that was missing. That was no issue to me today to pick up and say that I'm going to do my best to in putting him what I can. He's a Davis, but he's going to have some Tillman principles.
Wes, as it relates to black manhood, what are we missing, in your opinion?
Um, I too agree with everything that has been said. One of the first things I will say that we are missing is we're missing context. So we have a lot of conversation, but with the wrong context, right? We always we depend on Dion. Dion always hit us with a lot of historical facts and things about being a black man. But at the same time, when I say context, a lot of times we just point to those things that are missing. But do we understand the structure? Do we understand all the things that has happened to a black man since he stepped foot here in America? So when we put all of those things into context, you will see number one is that men have constantly been tried to be redefined, meaning that our manhood has been stripped or taken away from us. Now, when we look at that in context, that goes back from, again, day one, from the boat to land. All of a sudden, our identity as man has been stripped away from us. Even from the boat over to land that we call America, our identity as men has been somewhat attempted to erase. We have been oppressed. We have been attempted to be even brainwashed, right? Servants versus leaders. So you had kings that was on the boat, but then told that they were servants and beaten until they had the mentality of a servant versus being a king. So when we talk about what's missing, let's add in context. Another thing that we are missing that I will say is responsibility. Ezra just talked about that. That's that aspect of taking responsibility where it's needed. You know, for him to take in another child, not just some boy he knew, a relative. No, this is, he's treating his nephew as his own, right? As his son. Well, that's responsible. We talked about Coach Ellis. We, all of us have been coached by different individuals and things of that nature that has had an impact on our lives. But the question lies, as a Black man, how are you being responsible in your community? What are you doing? How are you serving your community? And before you even go serve your community, let's start first at home. You know, we all look good on camera, but how do our household look? How do our wife look? Rest in peace, Bishop Pryor. But I remember something he said, even when I was a minister in training. He said, you know, all of you all can dress up well and you can hoop and tune. You can be a wonderful teacher in the church. But the only thing I need to do is take 5 seconds to look at your wife, and I'll let you know how good of a man you are. Now, you can hype up a church, but if your wife over there looking depressed, that let me know you're not taking care of your home. So are we being responsible? Um, and then the last thing I would say we are missing is humility. And I want to kind of tap into something Quinn said. We, I don't personally believe in perfection outside of Jesus Christ. That's the only perfection I believe in. We're flawed as human beings. And can we humble ourselves and admit that, right? But we're so puffed up and we have been given a false narrative about manhood. So we're running and we chasing things, and it causes us to be prideful. Pride takes us away from truth. Let me say that again. Pride takes us away from truth. Pride will tell us that we are somebody when really we're not that. We're not someone, right? We want to say we're kings, but really we haven't even took on the aspect of servanthood. You can't just, you know, all of a sudden I come to a job and I need to be a CEO the next day. No, where have you served? Most CEOs have served in their companies or they're qualified. So men need to take uh, uh, a humble approach to being a man and know what that looks like. So we need to humble ourselves and be real and accept that we need to crawl before we walk. And then don't allow pride to take us somewhere that we can't stay or our character can't keep us in.
Um, I'm gonna start with Quinn, and then Dion, I want you to jump in. The thing, one of the things has been these expectations and traditions, right? And these false narratives that you guys have mentioned, the humility that needs to be in place, the acceptance of just the imperfection, right, and being okay with that. Quinn, speak to that. Dive a little bit deeper, if you would, into that piece, and tell me, kind of unpack that a little bit more as far as what that means to you.
Yeah. So to me, it's a reality. It's a sanity check. Is at a top level what it is. You know, a lot of times when we think things through, the mind is an incredibly dangerous place because it allows us to sometimes escape from the realities of our situation. And I think a lot of the things that were put in place, particularly in the Black community, were put to put us in a mental self check. Now, I grew up playing basketball with these guys, and so I'll explain it for the folks who don't know what that means. So when you play basketball, if you got somebody who is horrible at shooting like I was, the other five guys was just, one of them would say self check. You can see it by the smiles that they're trying to hide. Would say self check, and they would just let you shoot because they're like, he's probably not gonna make it, and if he does, we can live with it. And so, a lot of folks though are mentally running around on self check, and they're in this situation of dealing with these self-imposed penalties on their lives and on who they can be and what they can do. And I've been victim of it too. And I just think that the reality is we have to pull back from that self-check, and we have to more so carry it to what Wesley was talking about, to where we need, more of that affirmation of one another. Of, when I look around this, like I look around this group of outstanding husbands and fathers in this group, and men that I grew up with, who statistically are anomalies, according to the statistics we were taught. But the reality is we are men, we are black men, we are strong fathers, and we are not anomalies. We are the norm. And so to normalize this is really what we need to do, is normalize that the image I was told is a picture somebody else painted for me and for my people, but the picture that I paint is one of reassurance, is one of affirmation, it is one of brotherhood and unity, and most importantly, it's one of accepting each other as we are and not as who we want or need to be. Because I don't want to hide behind my insecurity, and I don't want to teach other people to hide behind their insecurity, because that speaks to that point to Wesley was making earlier about, you know, we just need to make sure that we're doing our best to, you know, it's the all the buzzword that people talk about being authentic, but I think what it more is talking about is being true to yourself. And so with that, I'll just pass it to Dion.
Superman does bleed, and we aren't Superman. So what does that make of us? You are flawed. You will fail. You do have fears. You do have insecurities. In TV shows growing up, I know y'all remember it used to be an ongoing joke, regardless of genre or race, about the father driving the vehicle, not wanting to pull over and ask for directions, and driving the family in the wrong way. I mean, good Lord, we can apply that to a lot of us nowadays. We're not willing to pull over the car and ask for directions. I don't know if it's pride, haughtiness, or this standoffishness that we have developed between generations and or intergenerationally. But what I do know is we need to. We're about to be 40. None of us been 50. How do we know what that is like unless we're willing to reach out and talk to people who's been on the road that we are headed to? Second thing about contextualizing this, we had a huge gap. We talked about this before. Absenteeism, mass incarceration, all types of different reasons, drugs, why a lot of people in our generation grew up apart from or not having their father, right? What did that mean? Strong mothers, right? Big mama, grandmama, mama, right? Strong mothers, right? Psychologically, you have been conditioned to bend towards the will and the wants and the voice of the woman. So naturally, when you get into your marriage, you will relinquish your leadership role, even co-leadership role. You'll shrink back, but your design is not for that. So it'll eat you up, right? But a lot of times, for the sake of peace, you will go back, you will shrink back because she's used to being strong because that's how mama raised her. And you used to listening to that, a woman, right? That's one extreme. So now you're in this box. You're married. You forced yourself in this box. You're trying to make up for the previous generation being missing, but you don't know how to do it. And you think the way to do it is to step back, not have these confrontations, give your wife everything she wants. But that pressure that you put yourself under, it'll explode one day. And it'll act itself out in different ways. Anger, drugs, alcohol, affairs, all types of things, right? We have to get mentored, discipled, walk through this process and learn how to navigate and balance. How do I balance being a leader of my household without being so patriarchal that I'm oppressive to my wife? How do I navigate this course and how do I balance this out? We got to reach out. We got to reach out. And we have to be able to reach out to them older people, mentors, people who have succeeded and people who have failed. And we need to find out, how did you get this thing right? And where did it go wrong so that I can avoid those pitfalls? We have to expose our insecurities, and we have to reach out to help people navigate us through.
You know, we talked about expectations, sort of these sort of false expectations or these um unrealistic expectations. But expectations are important, right, Ezra? I mean, there needs to be a set of expectations for yourself and for those mentors, those elders to kind of hold you accountable, right? Speak to that.
I think that in absence of the idea picture of us looking to and not having a particular person who's looking at you, it leaves us in the place where Dion is saying that we're battling between a pride issue, a haughty issue, or insecurity issue. And it can be easily, confused on what that looks like. For me, pride is something necessary. I think pride is something that is given to the model and picture of a man as ignorance and not defining him as a strength. For a person being prideful, and not to say I'm wrong, is an issue and a problem for anybody, but as it pertains to that being described to a man, he's an idiot. He's dumb. He don't know no better. Goes back to the whole concept. So the superior is that a woman has to tell him for him to know, versus us knowing the context of being Black, that anyone who's uneducated, who wants better for themselves, seeks out and asks for the right answer so they can follow it. So it's not a matter of man and woman or Black man and Black woman, but it's by context of how we end up this way, because we don't have people looking at us to hold you accountable. I look at my family, particularly growing up, and my frustration today, being transparent with me and my brother's relationship, that my dad raised me differently, raised him. Same house, same principle, same model in which he was. But I saw a difference how he handled me, how he handled him. Not being a parent. Today, I understand that your children are different. And you ought to have intelligence and insight of what you're dealing with, because you know they are different. And although we say we treat all our children the same, if you're being a good parent, you can't treat them all the same because their needs aren't the same. However, we both were held responsible. We both got consequences. We both got punishments. We both had standards, but he dealt with us differently. Growing up, going to school, all of us did. Our parents warned us about grades. They weren't checking our report cards, but my dad had a standard for me to get together. Now, later on in years, I heard a conversation my father had with my brother, and he was, straggling in his junior, senior year, whatever. And he told him, hey, man, you don't want to graduate? You want to do with your life, whatever? All right, you figure it out. And walked off. He would never say that to me. But from his model and from what his standard was to me, I understood that statement or the behavior, how he treated me, it called for another response of how I responded versus how my brother responds. I think that what I was having those models in our life, that is the Black context. If you don't have a picture, you don't have a coach, you don't have a role model, then who can hold you to any standard? Which goes back to the point we were saying about how our insecurities allowed us to breed our ignorance, because we got to figure it out. Some of us have learned it from strong women. Some of us didn't have a model of a strong woman. So we needed to be mothered by our mate. We need to be guided by someone else's opinion. We never found ourselves until we grown in our life experience with kids and responsibilities, whatever. We finally get it right and trying to repair a childhood issue we had with our child when we 60. You know what I'm saying? It's these type of things in our context of what we deal with. And so many of us ain't finding out who we are until we have dead. So I think back at the root of context, very important. Back at the root of what God says we are, very important. Back to the root of a role model, very important. Back to us forgiving ourselves and not make excuses of ourselves is core. Because at some point, whatever the standard a person may set for me may not fit me, but I ought to have a standard for myself. I should not be comfortable with failing me. I may never live up to the standard of what someone may set for me, but because they set some, I should get some kind of self-pride for myself that I want something. This is one of our frustrations we have with our context of Black race, is that we looking at each other saying, hey man, why don't you do something with your life? Man, you got a skill set. Why don't you make that a business? Why don't you trademark that? Why don't you handle your finances better? Why don't you pay your bills on time? Why don't you get your credit right? Didn't have the model, didn't have no one to set the standard, no one to point to. And they never built a self-worth, a self-pride to say, I'm gonna do better for me. And this is the issue we have in our community, is that mediocrity and getting by and using perks and trinkets to make us feel worth allows us to escape our responsibilities of being a man.
Wesley, how do we speed up that process where, you know, you know, you come from a number of strong men, right? Your dad, your uncles, you know, male dominated, just as far as like numbers, right? And then their presence, right? Just very strong personalities and presence. Um, what would you advise someone who maybe didn't come from that? How does one find a mentor, or how does someone figure out how to do this thing when they don't necessarily see it, on a daily basis or even a weekly basis, or hardly ever?
Yeah. Piggybacking on what was already said, you, I will say I will answer that with one word: availability. Make yourself available, right? So I heard the concept of reaching out or being mentored. What's the picture? Can I paint a picture? And I want to use the Bible to do so. Exodus chapter 18. Um, we know, for those of us who go to church, all that good stuff, we know the story of Moses, but do we know Jethro? There won't be, it wouldn't be no Moses if it wasn't Jethro, right? If you not to like go so deep with it, but Jethro was a priest. He knew responsibility. So he was a man that carried responsibility, right? So then he runs into Moses visiting because Moses married Jethro's daughter. He come into town and he's visiting and he's watching what Moses is doing. Moses is sitting there all day judging the church folk, handling issues, doing everything by himself. In other words, Moses was on a suicide mission. He was about to straight up kill himself by the level of responsibility that he was carrying. Pause right there. I'm just going to let that sit in for some of the men right there, because seriously, us men, we have a hard time asking for help. And if we don't learn how to ask in this season, it can cost you your life. Let me go back to the story. So here Moses, he's working, working, working. At the end of the day, Jethro deals with him, and Jethro tells him, you need to appoint 12 men that can help carry or share in the burden of ministry. How can Jethro speak to Moses? Well, he can speak to Moses because he know what that level of responsibility looks like, right? So Moses was available to serve his community, to serve his people, but Jethro came in with the authority, say, been there, done that. You about to kill yourself. Appoint 12 men and let them help carry that burden. So we don't, like Dion said, we about to turn 40. We don't know what 50 look like. So we should be talking to older men. We should make ourselves available to say, hey, dad, what is it like? My dad always teased us. He was making fun of my brother Brandon because I think Brandon came out and he had two girls back to back. And my dad was like, oh, can't help you with that one. Cause we ain't had no girls. He had all boys. Like, I can help you with the sons, but the girls is a different approach. You better talk to your mama or something. I don't know nothing about that, right? Because he never raised girls. He raised all boys. And so it's making yourself available. And then I'll just end with this: divorce pride, marry humility. Humility allows you to be available, right? Divorce pride. Stop thinking you got it all together. You don't have it all together. And it's okay. Nobody is requiring you to have it all together.
I'm gonna ask you this, and I want to go around the horn quickly, and try
Oh,
to make.
Ezra look like he hot. Hold on, B. What you got, Ezra? He hot.
Yeah, man. Well, I'm just trying to make sure that in our context, because you made that word very important. What we're missing is pride. And I want to make sure that we define the pride, not pride as in haughty, as Dion referenced to, but pride is in self-worth. Because in our context, that's what has been stripped. That was the plan. That was the structure. That was the goal. That was the means of how to control a whole people who have all of the things that was desired of those who envy them. So when we mention that, what I want to make sure that as we mention pride, we're not speaking about the point of self-worth versus the haughtiness. And that's the problem I'm having in trying to hear through us talking about the Black manhood issue, is that at what point and at what time do this person understands or find themselves? When do they get it? And so in this complex picture of, as Quinn shared on the last episode about Black being ambiguous, in many contexts it is, because many of us came from the city, many of us came from different hoods, different side of town. We got similarities, but a lot of different differences, right? And that being said, what happens is eventually we marry this concept that I only trust me. You can't tell me nothing. So when you mention about, okay, the point of holding someone accountable, who do we submit to be a teacher?
Well, I'm glad you said
You
that,
trying to go somewhere? Go
because
ahead, B. I'm gonna be
no,
quiet.
this is what I wanted to ask, and it leads right into it. Whose responsibility is it? I'd like to just get everybody's take on this. The mentor or the mentee in this aspect.
Both.
Ooh, hey,
Wes,
go
go
ahead,
ahead.
B.
Go ahead, Wes, and then we'll go to D.
I agree. I'm not even gonna, that it's both. It's the mentee part to say I need help, and it's the mentor part to offer that help. That's all I'll say.
What if they don't even know where to turn? They got two kids, a wife, they
Right,
barely hanging on.
It's the mentor. It's
right.
it's the mentor.
Okay.
Jethro gave unsolicited advice, and the
Moses didn't
mentee,
ask for it.
huh?
I say Moses didn't ask for it.
He asked for it, but he observed him, he watched him, he studied him, and he's seen how he had wore himself down. And whatever he let him smack himself against the wall, when he's laying down, he said, "You know what, young blood? Here's the plan. You need 12 men. This is why. These are the results. These are what you'll get." And then the other piece is those 12 got to be people that got your same spirit. He gave all of the nuances of him understanding his downfall, his recovery, and his success, and how you're gonna get ahead, about what works for him. Not just telling his experience of what he went through, what's gonna work for you, young man. And he respected and he accepted the advice. But if the mentor doesn't find interest or feel a responsibility or a call in who he is to deposit in somebody else, it continues the same cycle we in, because we're looking ourselves. Now I'm gonna say, just shut up. Saw a post recently of a friend of ours, a classmate, and he put on there, F everybody. If it ain't my family and ain't about the ones I love like that, whatever, don't call me for nothing. I guarantee I ain't calling you for nothing. Well, that's why we're suffering right now. Because if we want to look at how we have made it, we had this conversation offline backs, it's because when we left the country, when we left this place, like, you come to my house, we're gonna put you up. Don't worry about no rent, don't worry about no food, don't worry about none. You take care of it. As long as what you say, when your kinfolk said, as long as the lights is on upstairs,
As long as my head is hot,
as long as my head is hot, we're gonna take care of our
you
family.
got somewhere
That
to
was a
stay. That's right.
commitment, because
Yeah.
by context, we understood what it meant. Now, if we divorce that and we feel that we can do it ourselves, then that's why we keep abandoning any responsibility of helping to fix the problem with us. I'm gonna
You
take care of
talking,
mine.
sir?
What happens if anything happen to you? Who gonna take care of yours? That goes back to what we said earlier about we're not looking at the model of men who came into life and took on a woman that had 5 kids, didn't have no kids of his own and wanted some. And he was a man and he raised them children as his own. Just saw last night an issue between Future and old boy Russell
Russell Wilson.
Russell Simmons.
Russell Wilson. You say Russell Simmons, you stupid.
And so this big beef going on because this man marries this woman he loved, and he marries a child too. It's my responsibility. I ain't got to go back and forth with you. You chose to do what you gonna do. This boy in my house. I'm gonna do right by the mother and the child, being a man. And what happens? Future get mad because he didn't take the role of being a man. Then he want to throw shade on the picture of what a real man look like. And we entertain what's in the news, not saying, hey, Russell, the real role model. And that's how the cycle continues, because we ourselves aren't humbling ourselves to say, you know, this is a stand-up guy. I was in my foolishness. This were my mistakes. I couldn't fix him. What the case is, he doing right by my child, doing right by whatever. I'm gonna still do my part, be the father. He can replace me. I'm gonna do all that. However, don't challenge this man manhood because he's doing his job as a man. You chose not to do that.
Yeah. I one of my namesake, one of my uncles, my dad's oldest brother, when he passed a few years ago, Uncle Sonny. I don't know if I was just because I was a little younger. I didn't realize that all the people I called cousins, he didn't have any kids of his own, man. And I had no idea until he passed away. And I'm sure I wasn't the only one. He just he raised them like they were his, and they were his. It wasn't like that; they were his, right? Um,
Can
Dion, talk.
I want to do that for a sec?
Oh, go ahead, Quinn.
I just want to call it something different. I want, first of all, I just want to say I'm in 100% agreeing with what Ezra was saying, and I just want to call it by a different name. You say whose responsibility is it? And I agree with some mentors, but I want to call it something different. If we are to be reached out to, and if we want people to reach out to us, we have to model that behavior. And this is something we talk about in my home all the time, because I have all daughters, and I talk to my wife about her behavior, not from the perspective of I'm a man and do what I say, but saying like, look, these girls are going to do what you do. I'm their father, I'm their model of a man, but you are the model of a woman. And as much as I talk to them about strength and courage and confidence, they look at you. And yeah, they look at how I treat you, but they look at you as a model. And the same thing goes to people who we are mentoring, we want to mentor to, but people who, you know, look to mentor us, we look at their example. You know, the example you guys are using is a biblical one. And, you know, it talks to the importance of people looking at what you do instead of what you say and saying, I want to follow after him. In my career, they assign you a mentor. And what I found is that of all the mentors that they assigned me, the best mentor was the one that I went and found. It was a guy who I said, I want to be like him. I want to model myself after him. And the relationship that we developed was so much easier. And the way that we connected and communicated, and even the support by which he's thrown my way, has been such a easier relationship. And it's because of the modeling. And I speak to, when you talk about Russell Wilson, because I'm thinking of Russell Westbrook. Wilson, you know, Jay-Z had a line. He said, you know, in the future, people playing football with your son. Now, we know that was a direct shot at Future from Jay-Z, but the point is that modeling is really what it all boils down to. You guys are pointing to that modeling. And so I highlight that because I heard a word that kind of triggered me, and I think it triggers other people too. You talked about submitting, which is fine, and I totally get it. And being humble, I totally get it. But if we're to mentor the people, we always have to remember to speak language that makes them feel loved. And some people honestly are scared of certain words. And I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but I'm just saying we need to be aware of it to get them to that point. So
I agree. I agree with what I guess as both of us can argue both sides. That's very valid point. But in the observation of the person who's going to do the mentoring, he's observing the behavior of the mentee, and he knows of not if the person will receive it, right? So it still gives the importance of the mentor of if they're going to do their part. Because now I'm giving an example. So recently, I watched this movie on quarantine time. You know, many of us doing a lot of different things, trying to, get together. And so I'm watching Above the Rim, right? Y'all remember that movie?
I remember.
Shep and Nutso, right? So Shep, he he out there, he doing all that, right? So the coach tell him, hey, Shep, you need to talk to this young man. Shep like, I don't know nobody, nothing. You in a position, you see this boy got too much mouth, too much pride. You see the skill, you see him have the father model there. He's committed to the work. He'll do the hard work like that. He arrogant, all that. However, he needs somebody gonna meet him just like that on his level. Because if you don't, then you're gonna watch another black boy like yourself lose it. Because for yourself, what happened is you couldn't get over your past. So if he hit a wall, he won't be able to get over his past. So how do you break the cycle? Watch him, study him, as you said, and do your part. Now, if he don't receive it, it's not on you. Same thing pertains to us being a witness, us being a model. We can't win nobody to Christ. We can be a role model to them. We can share with them. We can't make them believe it, but it's your job to share. So I'm saying, even on that part of giving observation of if the mentee is moldable, is teachable, is the word I was looking for when you said about calling it something else. Sometimes you may have to address the resistance to still try to reach them, and the responsibility still falls greater on the mentor if he has a skill set.
I think you both are talking about, and I want to give Dion a chance to talk, but you guys both are saying that you have to meet them where they are. You guys both said that while you were thinking you were maybe disagreeing. You both basically said you have to speak their language if you're going to tap into that. They still may not receive it, but you got to meet them where they are. Sometimes it's head on head like that, and sometimes it's a different approach. But we got to know the audience, and when it comes to a mentor reaching out to a potential mentee, we got to find some common ground in order to stand on, right, to extend that offer. D, can you talk about we've talked about this generational um this dynamic between uh black men, right? Can you speak to uh historically what's caused the rift and what's caused the disconnection, in your opinion?
Uh, Untruthfulness. The previous generation wants to disconnect themselves from the results of the following generation. You don't like rap music, but you watch Superfly and Willie Dynamite and all that stuff all day, every day. Like, there is not a direct correlation from there to there. We know that. We know that. We grew up in Detroit City, right? Butch Jones is not our age when YBI tore this thing down. The Chambers brothers aren't our age. The Curry brothers aren't our age. But our generation were the monsters. In 88, we were 7. All right? There's a disconnection and there's an untruthfulness and a revisionist history that causes a barrier between you and me. Because I'm going to critique what you're doing and never recognize the part that we played. Maybe not myself directly, but we played in the way that you are now. We talked about whose responsibility is it, right? And as we drew it out, you have to go and make disciples of all men. But in order to do that, you have to become all things to all men, right? But we have to redeem the word submission. We've thrown it in the mud because people abused it. People abused the word. So women despise it, and men only apply it when we're talking about somebody submitting to us. So you want to be a leader without submitting to anyone. You don't want to be accountable to anyone. That doesn't work. There is nowhere in the world where you work your way up through the ranks without having been accountable to someone above you. Not anything that works. It just don't work. It don't. If you want to be, if you want to be the head, whatever, you got to work your way from somewhere.
That's a
But when
street.
it comes to
A
this
street.
life thing, say it again.
That's a street principle.
Yeah.
That's a corporate principle too.
Yes. Accountability, right? So we have to redeem that word submission, and we have to be truthful about it, and we have to say, yes, we misused it. Yes, we used it to restrict the voice and the movement of women at some point in times in some generation. Yes, we did. And yes, men ignored that we need to have submission ourselves. Yes, we did. But submission wasn't my idea. Submission was God's idea. So we have to redeem it and put it in its proper context, in its original intent, because he spoke about Moses. Moses submitted. That's how he took that advice. So um, when we're trying to bridge this gap between one generation and the next, we have to be honest about where we came from and our flaws. We talked about this earlier. It's full circle. Where we came from, our flaws, what we went wrong, how we tore this thing up a little bit, and how we trying to build it back up. So we're not just doing the you this, you that. Yeah, the boys' pants is below their butt cheeks. But guess what? We started with the pants below our waist, right? We didn't put them that far, but it started somewhere. We can't act like we just walked around our whole lives with the pants up and shirt tucked in. It wasn't like that. So we have to bridge that gap so that we don't come off as old heads using revisionist history to act like we were perfect and to stomp on the next generation of people.
All right, let's reset um, and talk about our next topic. Um, is sort of what's next and like where do we go from here? As it relates to Black manhood, um, we have Deion Carson, Wesley Morgan, Quinn Wright, and Ezra Tillman. I'm Baxter E. Hall, and I want to go around the horn and ask you guys, as it relates to Black manhood, where do we go from here? Ezra, if you would start us off, please, and give us your thoughts.
My personal thought about resetting is the idea goal, and you cannot reset without fixing the fraction. Like even the picture of the scripture come to mind about bearing the infirmities of the weak, things of that nature. Wherever it's about restructuring, it's like it's a doctor's type of mode of resetting bone, and I think that I heard it before from Dion about we cannot negate the hurt. I think Wesley sharing a different setting about we cannot overlook the wound. Like these things are here, and being strong is not trying to act as if they didn't happen. It's not acknowledging it. So if we look at our context and the emphasis on Black is that you got to have some kind of awareness of yourself. I think this is something that the Nation of Islam has won over men in acknowledging, understand where they come from, what happened to them, the design and the structure that broke them to put them in position, and then did the work to give them some form of getting back on their feet. So now we got to look at, okay, so now we have reached a point that it's common that there's no father in the home. It's common. There's no father active in the child's life at school. It's common that any concept of a man definition is hated by its own Black woman, its own culture. How do you fix that? I think as large as that problem is, it begins at starting with your own home. Old folk would say, charity start at home and share abroad, right? So if I can take these 5 boys in this house, and I can make sure that in the midst of them being around other boys that have these kind of structures in their own life, they understand within their home what it means to be responsible, what it means to be accountable, what it means to be neat, what it needs to be up early, what it means to be prepared, what it means to be, active and moving. I can help change some of that narrative, because eventually, as we all know, birds of a feather flock together. And we've shared it ourselves. We've learned things from each other, because the power of influence is swing both ways, positive, negative. And if I can make sure that this young man can learn these things, he can help change the culture and narrative and stereotype that have been put on us, by beginning with child I have in my home and making sure that I'm investing in him. And then I can look forward to his friends, classmates, teammates, and abroad. We cannot get there without saying that we must first address the brokenness and then move forward.
Quinn, what do you like to add to that?
Yeah. So, you know, to address that brokenness, I think how we move forward is simply moving forward in love. And there is more to it, but at the end of the day, the thing that we can do to essentially restore our humanity in ourselves, in the home, and in our community is focusing on doing things through a lens of love. Now, I don't mean go around hugging everybody, because it's COVID, so don't do that. But what I mean is, when you talk from love. When you are stern, you are honest from a place of love and not a place of judgment, not a place of critiquing, but a place of love. What I mean by that, like when I correct my daughters on their English and on their writing and how they approach things, and I am stern about it, I'm not doing it from a place of anger or pain. I'm doing it from a place of, I want the best for you and for your life. And I'm going to show you how these things can help you to get there. And on the other side, seeing when our friends, our neighbors, ourselves, we are hurting, and we address that hurt, and we acknowledge that hurt, and we affirm that hurt and say, yeah, that hurts. One of the things I wish we could do better in the Black community is affirm each other. The capping on each other and the dozens has always been something we can do well, but handing out those compliments always is hard, or comes with a backhanded, you're pretty smart for a dumb kid, or something like that. And that genuine love, that's how we move forward. Is not saying, hey man, literally saying like, look, it's hard for me to say, but like, you cool, man, or something like, find your own words. That was a poor example, but I think you guys know what I'm saying. Like, showing genuine love and acting out of love and respect for one another and respect for ourselves, to say, I appreciate what you are, I appreciate what you do, and by appreciating me, I appreciate you. And so I don't want to beat the love drum too bad, but I think at the end of the day, I'm not, one of the folks here who's going to come from the Bible, but the thing that I love most about the Bible and about the teachings of the Bible are simply this: if you don't understand anything else about it, if you don't ever take Latin or Greek or Hebrew, anything about that, the lesson is love. To love yourself and love your neighbor. And if we're going to move forward, we don't have to make it mystical or magical or anything else. Just be kind to yourself, to your neighbors, and give yourself some of that love.
Ezra, you got something to add?
Yeah, I'm gonna add on that love. I definitely agree that in our context, what is missing is that we didn't have men expressing love. We didn't have men who said, I love you. We interpret love by maybe a couple of dollars, or providing, or someone calling you out. But we, like you said, the affirmation piece, like that was something definitely missing. And it does mean something different, as Quinn shared about him affirming his children and his wife affirming children, because they're looking to what's like, right? Is my mother strong? Now I will go farther to say, I've seen that children have leaned towards another parent versus the other and despise the other because they didn't respect them for those characteristics. What I was gonna say about the love piece is, okay, he expressed the importance of love from the point of how you teach them, but I want to make sure it's an emphasis as it pertains to our culture now today, because these are the children and the results of those who said, I ain't gonna raise my kids like I was raised. So now they have no principles, they have no morals, they have no God, they have complexes on medication and end up on drugs and everything else like that, because we chose our picture of love was not to discipline with love. In my house, I got a boy that lies. I'm gonna give him some love. Yeah, I got one that pouts. I'm gonna give him some love too. I got one that's real sneaky. I'm gonna show him some love. Yeah, I'm gonna make sure that those things in which we're saying about what's missing within those historical pictures of manhood to some point of pride, you're gonna have it, because you're gonna set those same standards for others. You will never get there with me saying, well, you know what, that was wrong, and you know why your dad is upset. You know why you got suspended, because if they find there's no repercussions and timeout don't work, you got a monster on your hand, right? Then it's too late. Then they're in the system. And then by third grade, when they can't read properly, or fourth grade, whatever, they're in the system. They're already projected to lose. I'm going to show you some love early through discipline as well, of making sure these things are instilled in you, because we don't have this great timeline to make sure they get it. And I'm speaking from a context of being a father of boys, and the importance of make sure that love is not just an affectionate word. It's a decision.
And I'll say this, and we'll pass it to Wes. Whatever the discipline that you use, uh, we're familiar with discipline, right? But we're not always familiar with the words, right? We need to make sure that the words accompany that, so that they know. Again, back to expectations, that this is for you, because we want more. We want more for you, right? And we're not just punishing without sort of explaining what's expected, and continuing with that consistency that maybe something that was definitely missing back in the old school punishment.
I did want to say something too, just for folks listening to this too. What is the root of the word discipline? And I'm asking. It's discipleship. It's to teach. So we gotta just, as long as when we talk about discipline, we remember that root of that word is disciple.
That's good.
So
that's good. Yeah.
Just throwing that out there.
Yeah.
Wes, where do we go? Where do we go from here?
Good question. I will say we go back to the principal thing. The principal thing is bringing honor, restore honor back to being a man, bring honor back to manhood. We talked about mentorship and everything. We're talking about Jethro, Moses, all that good stuff. But even for a mentee has to see good character. He has to see a man that has authority. He has to see a man slash mentor who has a voice, so they don't mind submitting themselves or being accountable to a man who has a voice, who has great character, who can be looked upon as someone respectable in the community. We have too many men that is destroying manhood by their character. So they dishonor being a man by the things that they do. So we need people. I will say, I'm going to steal this principle from my pastor, Pastor Terrence. He came up with a FAT principle, FAT, fat. You need to be faithful, you need to be available, and you need to be teachable. So where we go from here is finding faithful men. We need men that will be available, and we also need men that are teachable. Even every preacher need a preacher. Every therapist need a therapist. Every doctor need a doctor. So we need people who are faithful, available, and teachable.
I like that. Dion, where do we go from here as it relates to black manhood?
We got to stand, and we have to stand on standards, accountability, and truth. Not our standards. We got to stand on God's standards, and it's been outlined for us. So it's a lot of principles in there. What is acceptable, what is unacceptable. So when we set these standards, we think about this. There was a time when you were more likely to get talked about in the hood if you had terrible clothes than you would be if you were a terrible father. Think about that. It was more acceptable for for you to have little kids running around that don't know you that much than it was for you to have bad clothes. We got to have standards. We have to have standards. We have to raise our children with standards. We have to hold our peers to standards. Peer pressure is a bad thing. Not bad isn't bad, but bad isn't good if you're using it in the right way. We have to be accountable. Accountable to ourselves, accountable to our families, accountable to our peers, accountable to God. And we have to be truthful. And you know I wasn't going to leave this thing without a quote. So tell me the truth. We must love people enough to tell them the truth, even if it's a truth you haven't mastered and they don't want to hear it. Within our friendships, we should be able to be undeniably authentic, because an authentic friend would rather be willing to hurt my feelings than to see me hurt my life. A friend may be the only person who can speak into my life truthfully. That's the Reverend Dr. Darius Daniels and Dr. Jamar Tinsby says, although the truth cuts like a scalpel and may leave a scar, it offers healing and health. The pain is worth the progress.
This is something that has been echoed, and I think all of us tonight have seen our views of some of the same principles, same ideas through our expression, through our ideology, through our Christian experience, through our personal relationships like that. But I think Quinn hit on it very well with that's the breakdown root word of discipline. I think that is a root issue for our race and our defiance against it, because in being controlled, if we feel any form of freedom, we go wild, right? And with thinking about what we're trying to say about trying to change our future in the picture of COVID, what platforms do we have to be a disciple? What communities do we have that we could be a coach? And in the inner cities around us, mysteriously all of the recreation centers are closed, shut down, vacant. Boys and girls clubs aren't really impactful like that. Big brothers and sisters, wherever all those particular pieces that may be on the outskirts of town, it ain't really effective in our areas. And so, in a time that people are anti-church, how can you enlist yourself to be a disciple? And then my question to us on where we go from here: who are you willing to disciple? And my personal conviction is that the mentor can see, can study, and know where his teaching may be received. One of the things I've learned as a young pastor, which woes a lot of people I work with and have done and had a long conversation today with a guy I just happened to be talking to, is that I spent time listening to my elders, but I knew my elders know I would listen in the first place. Pretty much who's going to take it or not, but I also have experienced those who have grieved going to the grave. They had no one to give it to. They had no one to pass the skill set to. They had no one that would take their family business. They had nobody who would take care of their property or land and make sure the legacy will live on. And so we got to take on our half, who will I look for to disciple? And I think now it's more meaningful than ever, that considering that none of us are promised tomorrow. COVID has shown all of us that in a matter of a next visit and us finding we have a breathing problem or ache in our bones, we can be out of here. So how more meaningful should it be now that we're looking to see how and who we can disciple?
I got one more thing. We have to dig into our history in order to build our men. And I'm talking pre-transatlantic slave trade. It's so many winds of doctrine, so much pseudo scholarship, and it's so much confirmation bias that our men are being led astray by goofballs telling them something that they think might be positive about themselves. Got a question for anybody watching this video. If we were all kings and queens, then who was working in the kingdom? Who was fighting the wars? Who were the generals? Who did the crops? No, it sounds good to say. I understand that. We had kingdoms, some of the greatest kingdoms to exist on this planet. But no, not everybody was a king and queen. I'm sorry. Some people were generals. Some people were part of agriculture. Some people were scientists. Some people were doctors. We have to dig into the truth of our history, because right now, any meme that looks good or sounds good or is anti-Black church, people throwing it out there. And I've had conversations and dialogue with people, and instead of standing on it and saying, you know what, you're right, I was wrong on that, they are finding something else. So we got to get this history into our young men and our young women early. We can't wait until they're already out there. We got to dig this into them early. That's going to be a major part into understanding who you are and looking at yourself differently, because you didn't start from slavery. You were never a slave, by the way. Your people were enslaved. It's different. But we got to get that into our head. We have to dig into true history in order to help ourselves too.
Okay. Wow. So again, we could go on for days, and I know all of these men, and they're really just getting revved up. But we're gonna wrap part two. Um, uh, Quinn, Dion, Ezra, Wesley, thank you so much for your contribution. It's so important to hear everyone's perspective and adding, the different pieces to this puzzle. A couple of you guys addressed the viewers. If you are watching this and you think this is a topic that other people should be privy to, conversation that others should be privy to, share, comment, like, subscribe. We're going to continue to have these conversations, and we hope that they are adding um, to the to your conversations, like we said in private, and also hoping that maybe there may be some folks that can come on and teach us some things and add additional color and value as we all try to unpack this thing and figure it out. We're not going to figure it out in one conversation, but we will continue with conviction to make sure that we're building, right? And that's really what it's about. Accountability is what I heard tonight. Humility, honesty, God, and setting proper expectations for yourself and for your peers. I think that can't be understated. Um, on behalf of all of us, the Black Men Conversation group, thanks again for checking us out, and looking forward to doing it again real soon, guys. Thanks.